According to the late scholar and author on leadership, Warren Bennis, trust is the lubrication that makes it possible for organizations to work. Can trust, this precious and fragile human value, be automated? The answer is yes. Some emerging technologies can automate trust by working together to ensure the authenticity of data while verifying identities and enabling secure multi-party transactions. This could be a game changer for companies, but not only. In this episode of Tech Talk, Louise and I have a very interesting conversation with Kurt Fields, Director in Emerging Technology Advisory at PwC, about automating trust, one of the 6 technology convergences that PwC has isolated. He will share with us concrete examples and answer some tough questions. Curious? Let's dive right in.
Welcome once more to Tech Talk. This is Season 4, Episode 13, the one on automating trust. In today's episode, Carla and I have the pleasure to talk with Kurt Fields, Emerging Technology Director in PwC US. Hello, Kurt.
Hello, Kurt. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.
It's really our pleasure.
Yes.
Our pleasure. So, with that said, let's begin, Carla. So you can kick off the episode with the first question.
Thank you, Luis. Well, we've talked about technology convergence before with Scott and Anand. 6 technology convergences that PwC isolated based on essentially emerging technologies, actually. So today we will talk about automating trust. And the first question is really, can trust, which is a precious human value, actually be automated?
So I think this is an interesting question because it's an evolving answer. So I agree that this is obviously a notion that is very human-based. But I think what we're seeing now is the technology is actually becoming sophisticated enough that it can truly enable some of the trust elements that we deal with on a day-to-day basis in society. The thing that I think is important to note that trust is obviously something that's very difficult to source, whether that's in a corporate setting, an individual setting, a government setting. So, when we think about putting trust on into technology, on top of technology, however you want to say it, it is only as good as the trust we have in the entities we're dealing with, the processes we're working with, and most importantly, the data that we're talking about putting into the technology.
So if I got this right, so we can automate trust as much as this trust is understood in our society. Is it something like that? What you?
Yes, because when we think about using these technologies, a lot of and especially the technologies we're talking about with automating trust, blockchain, AI, IoT, and such, the governance that we need to set up before we go live with any solution powered by these technologies needs to be agreed upon by humans.
Absolutely.
So it comes back to those fundamental elements of trust that we're recognizing before we go live with any solution. That being said, the great thing about the technology is, when we say we're automating trust, we're creating a more efficient and controlled way of adhering to that trust. And that's where we're seeing, again, corporates, governments, individuals get more value out of this technology when it comes to trust, because there are these new tools and capabilities to actually make sure we are respecting that trust. And right now, with a lot of legacy technologies and manual intervention in the way we work with each other, there's still a lot of vulnerabilities in how we're respecting the trust that we have with each other.
That's quite interesting.
May I ask something that just really came to mind? Does it make sense to automate trust in times of fake news?
You start with the philosophical questions.
Well, I like those, but it's just that because you said the system of trust will influence actually the technology or this convergence. So maybe a particular moment in time where this will work better Basically, that's what I wanted to say. I just use fake news because it's a contextual, but yes.
Yeah, so maybe let me take that question apart. So I think when we always get the question of, well, if we're using blockchain, AI, and IoT converge to automate trust, how high should my confidence be in the data and processes that are being enabled?
Exactly.
And the short answer is, when we talk about data, bad data is bad data. So putting bad data onto blockchain is still bad data. Blockchain's not going to fix that. I think the important thing, though, is that what these technologies are forcing us to do as a society is it's making us ask those important questions across entities around what does good data look like, what's good practice when it comes to data quality, and then when we think about workflows and automating some of the interactions that we have throughout these ecosystems, again, it's forcing companies and governments to come together and collaborate and push each other on what is fair, what is equitable, what can be trusted, what's the right level of transparency. Previously, without some of these technologies, many entities were just thinking about these questions within their four walls. So you already have a little bit of a bias because you're thinking about your own corporate mandates, your corporate strategy, your goals. You're not necessarily thinking about what your counterparties are doing or other constituents within your ecosystem. So these technologies, again, are forcing greater collaboration, and I think it's a healthy check on determining whether or not, again, data process and the stakeholders involved are adhering to the right set of rules and controls as we interact with each other. So in a time of fake news, absolutely, this could be an enabler for dealing with elements of fake news. That being said, if there are enough entities that are coming together to collaborate around a topic that may or may not be true or false, again, if it's up to them to set up that governance and permit certain facts to be documented and worked with. So it doesn't eliminate fake news. However, again, I think it drives us towards collaborating on what version of the truth should we see manifested on these solutions.
Okay, I can definitely live with that answer because it makes a lot of sense. It makes lots of sense. Thanks a lot, Kurt. So, well, you mentioned quickly the technologies that are part of this convergence, but could you just mention them again because you did that super quickly, and maybe the audience didn't catch that up. You mentioned blockchain, and then the others.
Sure. So I like to think of it as a little bit of a stack. So starting with the bottom layer, we need to get data from somewhere. So data can come from a number of different sources, including legacy technologies. But one of the newer areas that we're seeing become more prominent is IoT devices. And an IoT device can be as simple as the mobile phone in your hand that is contributing data to a network. It could be as sophisticated as an edge computing device that's being used by an energy grid. There are a number of different devices that fall into the bucket of IoT, the Internet of Things. So data is coming from all of these IoT devices, and we know that the number of devices globally is increasing exponentially. So data sets are increasing exponentially. Blockchain becomes that next layer, that important layer, because what blockchain is enabling is essentially a way to verify whether or not that data is sound. So if it is acceptable to a network that the data is being contributed to, then the data is being memorialized on that network. Take that a step further, and what we know we can do with blockchain networks is once we have this agreed upon, verified, secure data sitting across a network of parties, we can layer in things like smart contracts, which smart contracts are simply digital business logic. So we then start to automate workflows and automate interactions across ecosystems based on that data that was agreed upon and when it came into the network. When we have that layer, then I take this up another layer to AI. So once we, again, have data plus the process that's using some of this data, we can start to get smarter about all of this. And we can use simple analytical capabilities, or we can start to use things as sophisticated as AI. And essentially, AI, again, offers the opportunity for us to get smarter about what's actually happening in these networks, in these ecosystems, as entities or organizations are interacting with each other.
Well, my next question was exactly about hierarchy. And I wanted to ask you if blockchain is the master technology, but now with your answer, I'm not so sure that I got it right.
No,
Maybe AIs.
yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, we tend to think, and we're discussing this with Carla, that every convergence has I would say, a boss. And if that boss, if that technology doesn't move, the other ones have to wait. So it's like, even if the other ones go further, I don't know in terms of development, but there is one core that actually influences the others. This is what we think. Maybe we are absolutely wrong, and this is not the way it happens. But could you please elaborate a bit on that one?
So I would say that each of the three technologies I mentioned play a very significant role. I think what's unique about blockchain, though, is I think of it as the connective tissue. Again, when we think about any entity, private sector or public sector, trying to interact with each other, we know that there are multiple systems involved, there are multiple data flows involved, and it can be a very painful process. Blockchain is helping to address that, and it's helping ecosystems interact better with each other. And again, it really is driving a lot of that trust component, because what you can codify into a blockchain platform is that essentially that governance that is, like we were talking about earlier, is addressing some of the trust principles that an ecosystem has agreed upon before any of these types of technologies are being collaborated on. So I think from a trust standpoint, blockchain is extremely important here. That being said, IoT and AI are just as important, because on one side of the equation, we have to get data from somewhere. And then on the other side of the equation, AI is obviously helping us do the really exciting things with our data as we look to get smarter about the data sets that we have.
And Kurt, also this is another question, just these dangerous questions that Luis has all the time. But this is about, it's only this convergence works only with blockchain, or it could be any other distributed ledger technology?
So it depends on the use case and what an organization is, or a group of organizations is trying to accomplish. More often than not, we're talking about blockchain. Okay. I think one of the, maybe I'll answer a little bit differently too. One of the other questions we get asked a lot is, what about private versus public blockchains, permission versus permissionless? And again, this all comes back to, well, what does your ecosystem need from a trust standpoint, and what do you want to enable? The beauty of blockchain is it can be private, it can be permissioned. You can control who gets to see what because of their role. That being said, the technology is also maturing fast enough that we're seeing a high degree of confidence and interoperability across the various instances of blockchain being used globally. So we're seeing private blockchains being interoperable with public blockchains. And again, we're seeing entities get more comfortable with using both permissioned and permissionless blockchains.
Interesting.
Okay. Interesting.
Now let's jump to examples. One example of automating trust that comes to my mind, it's, for instance, using Internet of Things sensors to track a pallet of food from farm to the warehouse, the store, so to verify the whole supply chain. Is there any other industries that could benefit or that are benefiting from this convergence?
Absolutely. Frankly, we're seeing examples in every industry. Another one that I think is very real for all of us is the aviation sector. So I'm sure most of us have been on a commercial plane before, and if you think about a commercial plane, it's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of parts all moving at once in the same direction. And what blockchain plus IoT and AI in many cases is seeking to do is essentially replicate a digital twin of that assembly of parts. And right now, the struggle with getting data about the parts on a plane and how that plane is being serviced is, again, you have multiple systems involved, potentially data quality issues, and a less than efficient process. I'll just say it that way. And so we're seeing commercial carriers collaborate with equipment manufacturers, servicing companies, maintenance companies, a number of other stakeholders in the aviation ecosystem to get smarter about how these assets are getting utilized, how they're being serviced, and communicating in real time about that data so that they can be more proactive and less reactive about how an asset is being used.
Okay, that's very interesting.
And yeah, actually, I will skip one question because I want Nadia, you mentioned supply chains and all that. So, can you walk us through every step of this supply chain? How does it really happen? For instance, I can put a very tangible example. I don't know. I produce dairy products. I have and I want to guarantee, or the supermarket wants to guarantee that product is fresh.
It's not compromised. Yeah.
Exactly, and comes from happy cows. So I'm referring to a very, very simple example, very basic.
No, that's a very good example, actually.
So everyone can really get this one.
I think all the time when I'm buying something that it's labeled bio, but it's actually yes, but it's actually bio or not.
Especially here in Europe, that everybody gets crazy about bio, and also I buy some things bio, but is it really bio or bio?
Yeah. We're dealing bio with because it's here. Yeah, and I think that comes back to, we have to ask ourselves the question of, where are there potential doubts about the trust in that supply chain? So the consumer is asking that question, a distributor may be asking that question, the vendor, the market that ultimately is selling it might be asking that question, and we all may have different answers. So in assessing this in terms of where we think these technologies are adding value, we always want to start with, well, where do we think there's a break in trust? Or where is trust expensive and difficult to get? And so if I think about that example, it can start with very simple techniques. I mean, when you think about the dairy farmers themselves, they need to offer up some sort of proof about how that milk is being not only gathered, but potentially processed and then shipped out from the dairy farm itself. So it could start with very basic techniques of photos to document the process. It could be testing data about, or sampling data about the milk itself. It could be controls around the temperature at which the milk is being stored at the dairy farm. All of these things, again, lend themselves to IoT devices. Again, a picture could be taken by a mobile phone. There could be temperature sensors where the milk is being stored. The food that is being fed to the cows could be tested for its ingredients. These different data sets could be contributed to a blockchain that has the various stakeholders of the supply chain on it. As we think about then that milk leaving that farm, there is some mode of transport to get that milk to the next step. Again, we most likely would like to see temperature sensors on that truck to make sure that the milk itself has not been spoiled or at risk of spoiling. That data could be contributed. We then will probably see multiple intermediaries before it actually gets to a market. But ultimately, when it gets to the market, same question. You want to make sure that there is quality of care in how the milk is being handled, stored, and that the packages themselves have not been tampered with. What's to stop someone from adding additional ingredients to modify the milk? Mm-hmm. So a lot of this comes back to, well, how are we gathering that data? And this could be a mix of, it could be photos, it could be sensors, or frankly, again, if we have trust in our employees throughout this value chain, there's a certain level of attestation too. So you could have a workflow, a mobile app that's saying, for the person that's actually delivering the milk, they have to log into an app and attest, yes, I delivered the milk within 24 hours, because beyond that, potentially the milk spoils. Something as an example.
Okay.
But so, we have to put some trust in the people and think about what we want them to attest to. We also want to lean more on some of these IoT sources. And then, again, this potentially provides visibility. So whereas, the market may have only in the past had visibility into one or two of the stakeholders in the value chain, blockchain could potentially enable greater visibility for all of these different stakeholders that are now sitting on this blockchain platform.
But now that you mentioned, you first need to think of where in the chain there is doubt. Now I will start thinking myself.
That's a very good point.
It's a very good point, because maybe we are not sure about that, but I don't know who to blame or which part of the chain to blame. Probably the supermarket, to be very honest. Probably that one, because it's the one that is really in front of me, and I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, actually, I think I will jump a few questions, because you mentioned something very important, which is trust in people. And one of the questions I had is, can we truly automate trust? Because we have all these the technologies, so blockchain, Internet of Things, and AI, but it's us humans behind the whole thing making it happen. So can we humans screw it up? That's the question. We'd love to hear your view on that.
So I think the short answer is yes, we can absolutely make mistakes, and mistakes can be codified into technology solutions. That being said, again, I think the unique thing about blockchain technology being used is, more often than not, the use cases for it involve multiple different entities. And so inherently, I think it's a unique technology, because since there are multiple parties at the table trying to figure out what is the right governance, how do we get to trust, there are more checks in place on what's actually getting codified. Again, compared to some of these other technologies where it might just be one entity in the driver's seat of figuring out how that technology should be used. So it's not a perfect answer, but I do think that there is a greater level of trust that can be surfaced in bringing multiple entities together, because you're forcing each other to think more thoroughly about what shared trust looks like. So in the example we just talked about, again, we may say we don't trust the market that's selling that milk. Well, we might find that a distributor and a farmer also share that sentiment. So when you have multiple different entities in that value chain agreeing upon that, guess what? The market that's selling that milk is going to have to change the way they do business. So I think blockchain is becoming an empowering solution for a lot of different entities in various ecosystems as well. It's giving a voice potentially to stakeholders that had less of a voice in the past. And it's providing more transparency. So where things may be going wrong, there is now greater transparency into some of those wrongs.
And I guess accountability.
Exactly.
Well.
Exactly.
And I guess it's also, useful for very simple things, simpler things like verifying a certificate I got from certain university. I don't know. I'm just saying, because now in these COVID times, everyone is getting certifications and we don't know. I mean, I was thinking of this simple case because I saw one this morning, and maybe also blockchain can certify that in a way. I don't know. Could be.
Absolutely. I think that's a common problem that everyone deals with. As an individual, as an employer, as a government, everyone struggles with this notion of verifying identity and verifying credentials. And we're seeing certain industries collaborate on these credential management platforms so that they can actually very quickly verify and onboard someone based on their credentials. So the verification or the onboarding is happening once, and then very easily entities that are participating in the platform can query to figure out whether or not someone is who they say they are, and that they have the skills that they say they do to perform a certain function. And that gets triangulated with a lot of other use cases as well. I brought up the aviation example before. Think about any mechanic that is operating on a plane, and if something goes wrong with a part, one of the first things that obviously is going to be checked is, well, whoever touched that part last, did they have the right credential to do what they were supposed to be doing? So you can see this credential or qualification management use case very quickly bleeds into some of these other use cases in supply chain and in other areas.
So, well, I mean, until this point, I understand it's pretty positive, particularly as far as I can see, for big entities or big organizations. But are the small organizations also play part of this game? Because then also came to my mind, it's a very expensive type of solution to implement, or not necessarily?
It's not necessarily a very expensive solution to implement. I think the bigger question is around again, coming back to what is the business value that a small organization would be getting out of potentially co-developing or developing a blockchain platform. They may not have the resources to potentially develop their own. That being said, the important thing is that they may want to participate in a blockchain platform. And that takes a little bit of investment to understand, well, what am I looking to get out of this platform? It always comes back to the business case. So we might not necessarily even be talking about technology investment. It's more about, well, what does readiness for blockchain look like? How would I like to participate? If there's a benefit realized on this blockchain platform, what cut of that would I like? Is there a cost savings event, a revenue generation event? And then coming back to classic concerns around governance, security, et cetera. You want to know what the right questions are to ask when you are either approached by a larger organization in your value chain that's saying, I'm now using blockchain, or when you're seeking out a blockchain platform to participate on.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned some benefits. What about the downsides of this convergence? I mean, nothing's perfect. So security risks, ownership of data, also access permissions, and will people want their data to be, public or to a company, of the knowledge of a company? How do you see the downsides?
Yeah, I think these are all great risks to raise, because at the end of the day, nothing is perfect. So, while blockchain is delivering very high levels of security in terms of the technology that is enabling that capability, at the end of the day, the blockchain is interacting with other technologies as well. So, there can be vulnerabilities in the broader technology stack that may not be accounted for or may be overlooked. And then when we think about privacy and permissions, again, this comes back to the governance question. The privacy and permissioning that you're trying to enable is only as good as what your considerations were in that upfront governance that you're using. And a lot of organizations are trying to think through, what does decoupling data from the source look like, so that we can have this anonymized data flowing on platforms like this, so that the data can be used meaningfully, but we're not compromising security or privacy of an individual or a specific entity. And so I think the resounding agreement that we're seeing across various industries is that, again, the technology is there. The technology can enable, empower, and address a lot of the concerns that we're talking about. The challenge is, and it goes back to a point that you both raised at the beginning, do we trust the humans behind this? And so making sure that we're challenging each other on this upfront governance and making sure that the risks and controls frameworks that we're even using in these solutions are as good as we say they are.
So maybe this is a silly question, but so this convergence there are already cases, it's already happening. It's already being used, I mean. Okay.
Yes, I think that's the exciting thing. We're seeing, if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, there were very limited examples of where these technologies were being converged outside of a lab environment.
Okay.
Fast forward to today, and we're seeing a number of examples where we're outside of the lab, meaning these technologies are being used together, touching live data, live systems, actually addressing real processes today.
Okay.
Which takes me to the next question, and it has to do with financial services and Luxembourg. Luxembourg is the second fund distribution hub in the world. So I think this technology, this convergence, can bring tremendous benefits to the country. So when we were, the first when we ran the first of this series of episodes, we talked to Scott Likens and we told him, Scott, we think this is one of the two convergences that we have chosen to apply in Luxembourg, according to our experience. And he actually was, he said, yeah, you might be right. So what do you think about our choice? And in general, is there any example applied to financial services, the financial services industry?
Absolutely. And so I agree that this notion of automating trust could be a game changer for a country like Luxembourg, given that a large part of the economy is driven by financial services. I think maybe I'll answer a little bit differently, and then you tell me if you have a follow-up question. But I think the important piece here is, aside from driving greater trust and transparency within the financial services sector in Luxembourg, I think what this potentially does for the industry is it provides greater visibility into the other industries that financial services is touching. So I go back to think about supply chain as an example. There are a number of different financial institutions that are relevant in any supply chain equation. So what these technologies potentially enable is the financial institutions that are involved in those value chains. They may have greater visibility now. They may have better trust than in what's actually happening. If you're financing a large asset, let's say you're financing an oil rig, there has to be some sort of financial institution behind that. How do you know that the oil rig is being built in a way that you had hoped, that the asset is actually generating revenue in a way that you had hoped, and that it's being serviced in the right way? All those considerations, those questions that any sort of financial institution would want an answer on, they now have an opportunity with some of these technologies to get better data, trusted data, and again, get smarter about that data. So the visibility potentially increases. So I see an opportunity for Luxembourg to have a better view of I'll call it the dotted line they have to other industries, other jurisdictions that their institutions are actually doing business with.
That's tremendously interesting, especially now
Yes.
in times of ESG. The times of
I was thinking
environmental.
exactly the same.
Exactly.
Luis.
The country, particularly Luxembourg, but also Europe, is trying to lead. This trend of sustainable finance, sustainable
Very
investment.
hot topic.
Very hot topic, but because we live in Europe, and for us, it's very hot topic. But I think in other regions of the world, probably they are a bit lagging behind, which is good for Europe, I would say, because we need to move faster, at least on this. Because in technology, I don't think we are going that fast. But I think it will be very, very valuable, for instance, to assure or make sure that the data collected for ESG reporting is actually trustworthy. For instance, I'm just thinking out loud, but this is one of the big problems of ESG reporting: is where do you get the data from? Is it a trusted partner? Is this a trusted source? So I think this is, very powerful.
And also to make it somehow tangible, like to have a sort of how to say, not taxonomy, but that everything is aligned, that you get the same data for everyone.
Yeah, and I think about it in two ways. I think about the actual process of getting the data and connecting an ecosystem, and then there's also the other piece around an entity's declaration. You know, we're seeing entities do an annual declaration around this was my ESG impact or footprint for this year. Well, okay, that has to now be triangulated with the process that's enabling that, the data that's enabling that, the ecosystem that's involved. So it becomes a circular equation, but automating trust is a part of all of that.
Nice.
So we still have two questions to go. And Carla, because I am cool, I will give you one and I will take the last
Well,
one.
thank you, Luis. That's very kind of you.
You are welcome.
So the question is, how far are we in terms of technology and even social readiness to see these coverages become ubiquitous? I don't know if I'm pronouncing this. I have omnipresent. I think that's better.
Omnipresent.
That's
It's
easier
easier.
for me.
At least for
Yeah,
us,
and
it's easier to pronounce this, definitely.
yeah, definitely. And also because I thought about this in terms of COVID crisis, COVID-19 crisis, that we are would we have faced it differently if automating trust would be more developed? And I think particularly in the case of the rollout of the vaccination
Vaccine, yeah.
campaigns.
Yeah, so I think I'll answer again in two ways. So from a technology standpoint, these technologies have proven themselves. We know that the capabilities are there. I think what we saw with COVID-19 is a challenge that we're seeing for a number of different use cases. It still comes back to entities getting comfortable with each other when it comes to shared process, shared data, shared rules. And that's still relatively new for us as a global economy, as you know, various countries that interact with each other. You know, being able to codify our interactions with each other into a technology solution is still something that's uncomfortable for a lot of jurisdictions, for a lot of corporations. So that's I think the last piece here. We still have a little bit of a journey ahead of us in entities getting comfortable with each other, in co-designing and collaborating with these technologies. You know, with the COVID-19 example, could there have been greater transparency in the data being shared about how the pandemic manifested? Absolutely. But again, there were certain barriers outside of the technology in the way that we all interact with each other. So that I think that we're seeing the other piece of the equation start to catch up, which is this notion of us collaborating and co-designing the way that we actually utilize these technologies. It's a very different and unfamiliar motion for a lot of entities that they have to do this outside of their four walls. It's very different when you're trying to use a technology or use a data set within your four walls.
Of course.
So I think we're getting there. The important thing is the technology has at least proven itself.
Mm-hmm. So basically,
no.
Shall I go ahead? I just want to say that I feel it's like humans need to trust the technology and humans need to trust humans,
which is pretty impossible. I mean, I'm not negative. I'm just being very human, and I think we'll always have the good will, but also the bad will. And this is something we have to live with.
Yes, also because there are economical interests behind.
Going on now in the world, it's just, you know what, I prefer not to see the news because is there something positive going on? I don't remember.
Well, I think that's a good point too with these technologies too. We're not talking about putting every use case or every piece of data onto blockchain or even a more converged solution that's automating trust. It's what are the realistic, tangible use cases that we think we can collaborate on, and it's not that we're trying to address every single piece of our economy with these technologies.
Absolutely, you're right. Which also leads me to the last question, Kurt, and it's very personal. And I think we asked this to Anand Rao in the previous episode. In your darkest dreams, Do you fear technology? Because I do. And I always ask things that I feel because I do. And so, yeah, that's the simplest question I could have asked, but I also think it's pretty interesting and personal.
I don't fear technology, and I've asked myself that question, and I like to look back at historical examples. So if we were to ask ourselves this question 100 years ago, would I have been afraid of an automobile? Would I have been afraid of an airplane? The many people would have answered yes. And look at where we are today. 30 years ago, if you asked someone to use the internet, there was a lot of fear about the internet. So I don't doubt that there are challenges ahead for us, and that the technology, I know there are fears about technology becoming too powerful, but again, humans have always been able to address some of those challenges around how these technologies are being managed. So I have trust or faith, I should say, in our ability to get ahead of some of these concerns. And history has shown us that we've been able to use some of these at various times emerging technologies in a productive and a meaningful way. So I'm more excited than afraid.
No,
So
I am
Kurt is more
excited.
positive than you,
No,
Luis.
no, it's just that I read, I read one sentence that really, it's in my mind. It's true what you said, but this is the first time when something is thinking, and we have got to the point where we don't know how they think, especially these neural networks that are. We don't know how the result is done. And actually, the other day I was listening to a podcast from The Economist, and the guy, it's a writer, and he was saying, I am not afraid of, let's say, a robot feeling. I am afraid of the robot understanding human feelings and manipulating them. And that killed me because that is what I am afraid of.
That's
And
quite
the
frightening.
elections, the elections in the world now with the fake news, this is artificial intelligence manipulating human feelings behind, because there is an algorithm behind thinking of this. Now, this is the
That's a good
basics.
point.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if we get more sophisticated, but it doesn't have to do with the convergence anyway. And we can have a glass of wine with this, but
Well,
it's a very interesting topic.
true. I think, well, we need to be smarter than the machines.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I
I am
am more, I fear
positive.
more humans than technology, to be
Yeah, me
honest.
too. I'm just being a bit, I always try.
Yeah.
But in general, I have some fears. I am not that crazy, super positive guy. No, I'm not saying you are, Kurt. But you see sometimes these publications that yes, everything is awesome, and it's like the Lego movie, the song, everything. No, no, everything is not awesome because
No,
in the
I
end,
agree with you. There are a lot of
uh,
concerning elements, but I think to your point, behind all of this though, it still comes back to the human component. They're going to be bad actors, and it's our job as humans to address those bad actors. The technology it's just a manifestation of what we're creating. So we can't be worried about the technology, or I should rephrase, we should be less worried about the technology and more worried about the humans behind it.
exactly. Well, I think it has been a wonderful conversation, and it's just time flies and goes by super quickly. It has been
That's
already, I
true.
think, 1 hour talking, but probably these are the topics that you can talk about for hours. But
Yeah, super
anyway,
interesting.
I know you're very busy, and we actually thank you a lot for your time.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, it was a wonderful conversation. And all the best. Take care. Be safe. And I hope we all get vaccinated as soon as possible.
I agree.
No,
Yes.
no, that's the new thing. Get vaccinated. before before it was wear a mask.
Well,
Now
we're
it's
not doing
we,
so well here in Europe when it
no, we
comes
are
to
not.
that.
We are doing very as well, very slowly. Anyway, so thanks a lot, Kurt, and
Thank
have
you.
an excellent day.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all for today. This is Tech Talk, technology made simple over a cup of coffee. Thank you for listening, and until the next episode.